Hello again, this is another video on the Pixel Dailies theme. In this case it was a Halloween costume, and I decided to do some silly kid with a dinosaur or some sort of lizardy costume that was probably done at home. I just thought it would be funny. So I start by sketching out the shape. I did a previous one. I didn't really like how you didn't see the tail, so I made him a little bit slightly on the side. In this way I can still see the tail. I can see most of the figure of the body, and I want to have the head sort of in shadow inside of the body, or the costume, that is. Now for me to be able to do that, I'm going to have a top lit situation, or at least it helps to have a top lit situation, by which what I do is I create a shadowy face that is being underlit by the reflective light from the ground. Now what you're seeing here is me redrawing. This is a process I usually don't do because I don't usually work in line art. I work in shapes, and then I build in the finer details by adding, tiny lines or tiny textures. But I never really do a lot of these cartoon work, which is to gradually create shapes and lines. Now I'm doing all the lights that I want using lasso tools with no anti-alias, and then I'm just changing the brightness and contrast of that specific color to simulate its light. I'm painting in the line work, and I do that quite a lot to gradually get a darker tone of the one that I have on the inside. So here's me doing the underlight and the bounce light for the face. It takes a while for me to hit the face and the kind of face the kid has, and I'm having some difficulty because it's kind of looking like it's an old person, and that was my first ever donation in history, so to speak. It was recorded on video. That was awesome. So the kid is holding one of those jack-o'-lantern kind of bags. I'm not sure if it's a bag, but it's a container for the candy that you're going to get. And as I'm drawing this, I'm kind of feeling the need that in some spots I need to add darker elements, and that's why I bring in that black again. But I add the black only in parts where the folds of the clothing or the hole on the clothing or something is really deep, really sunken in, or really in shadow. So that's basically an extra color that I can put in for just extra depth in a way. Now I'm doing a fairly decent job in keeping the color count low, and as I add more colors to the drawing later on, I actually have still a pretty decent job of keeping the colors low. It still is a 19 color image, which is kind of stressful because I was hoping to get this done in 16 colors. I add that other color right there to create the anti-alias, but also to bounce light back onto the clothing. And the reason for this is that if I bounce the light back onto the suit, it's easier to justify the color also bouncing up to the head, especially considering skin is a bit more reflective than normal cloth like cotton or something like that. So I'm still playing around with the shape of the face. I'm not sure if I really like it, but as I'm gradually painting it, I think that eventually I just kind of grow used to it, so that it really doesn't bother me, but doesn't mean it's correct. Now doing the jack-o'-lanterns here, I also want to get some reflected light from the bottom, so I start the core shadow of that jack-o'-lanterns a little bit earlier, so that there's room for a lot of shadow, because you need to add the bounce light in the shadow areas. Now adding a bit more detail here by just adding the shapes for the teeth, and I use the dark gray from the eyeball to add those in, like if there were pieces of cloth that were sewn onto the suit, and that's why the teeth at the bottom are pointing down and not up, because they're just not rigid, they're cloth. I also add the shadow there just for visual interest, and again the guy is wearing tailors because it's usually the kind of shoes that I like to do in pixel art. What I did there, which is saw me do there, was create a shape with a lasso tool on the bottom layer, and then duplicating that onto a new layer and changing the color of that just to create those spots. Now some of the times I pause a little bit because I'm chatting with people on the chat. I'm typing that in because these past few videos I've not been able to chat. So here I'm doing a moonlit version and just add contrast to the cut shape. I quite like it, and it makes sense, but I think it's more ridiculous if this kid is actually going out trick-or-treating during the day. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to get there before everyone else, which kind of goes in with the silliness of the suit as well. Adding the cast shadow there, what looks to be a tongue, helps define the folds on the clothing, because if the tongue is flat but the shadow of the tongue isn't flat, it means that the clothes underneath are not flat either. So here I decided I want to have the kid standing at the door. This is clearly his mom taking a photo, right? Because he's looking at the camera, He's already at the door. He's ready to trick or treat his first house. And I'm doing the panels on the wooden house on the side. This is being done on the background layer, and I gradually make things whiter and whiter as they fade off, because I want to give it this sort of impressionistic feel that this isn't, 100% real, or it's a stylized version of reality. I was going to do tiny, thin strands of grass, and then I sort of gave up on that because then it would just become really noisy, and I just want the background to sort of fade off. And again, the grass that you see, the color are both present in the yellow spots on the costume, so I really don't spend any more colors on that. I do spend a few more colors creating the shape, a different tone on the tongue, and the spines on the back, or the spikes on the back, are not a different color. So I'm gradually just fixing colors here and there, and overall I'm quite happy with the result. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much, and take care, and I'll see you next time.